this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
The decision did not arrive as a suggestion, a discussion, or a private warning. It came as a signed royal order bearing the authority of King Charles himself. Queen Victoria's historic brooch collection, jewels long associated with sovereign power, marriage, and royal continuity, was being removed from Camilla's control and transferred directly to Catherine. By the time the Queen understood what had happened, the decision was already final. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla read the first page twice. She sat with the document across her knees, then placed it flat on the table, and asked her equerry whether Charles had approved every line himself. The answer came quietly, yes. The royal order, an official written command carrying the sovereign's authority, did not merely change where the jewels would be stored. It transferred custody, ceremonial control, and future wearing rights to Catherine, leaving the Queen unable to display, loan, restore, or wear a piece without the Princess of Wales giving approval. The collection carried far more than financial value. Queen Victoria had worn these brooches through marriage, public duty, diplomacy, and the long mourning after Prince Albert's death. Each jewel preserved part of a reign that reshaped the monarchy, making control of them a symbol of trust, memory, and continuity. Camilla believed her position as queen guaranteed ceremonial access for state visits and historic anniversaries. Now that expectation had vanished with one signature. Charles offered no explanation. When she requested a meeting, the king sent word that the matter would be discussed later. His refusal deepened the wound because it suggested this was not routine jewelry management or preparation for the future. Something had broken his confidence, and she knew it. Catherine received the news at Windsor. She entered expecting a discussion about upcoming duties, but Charles placed the transfer file before her and said the collection was now under royal stewardship, meaning responsibility for protecting and authorizing its use on behalf of the crown. She did not smile. The future queen understood that the honor could look like a victory taken directly from Camilla, and every brooch she wore might become another public judgment. Then Catherine noticed a handwritten reference in the margin. It named a Victorian anniversary ceremony and one restricted brooch that should never have left the royal vault. Charles closed the file before she could ask more. But before anyone could understand why Charles had acted so decisively, the palace had to confront the three people now trapped inside the order, and the private wounds each of them brought to it. To the outside world, the dispute appeared to concern diamonds, gold, and history. Inside the royal family, it was about recognition. Camilla saw the brooches as proof that she had finally been accepted. Catherine viewed them as a burden she had never requested. Charles understood that whichever woman held them would be seen as the monarchy's future. One royal order had therefore transformed a collection of jewels into a verdict on belonging. Camilla stood before the open jewelry case and touched the empty velvet space where one of Queen Victoria's brooches had rested only days earlier. The loss struck deeper than she had expected. For years, historic royal jewelry had represented something she had once believed might never come: acceptance. She had entered royal life under suspicion, endured public hostility, and eventually been crowned queen. Access to those pieces had convinced her that the institution no longer viewed her as temporary, controversial, or secondary. Now the vacant space felt like that acceptance being withdrawn. The Queen turned to a trusted aide and said the removal felt less like administration and more like a public demotion. The aide offered no reassurance because the royal stewardship order, the formal arrangement deciding who protects, approves, and controls items held for the crown, left little room for interpretation. Camilla still had a title. She still stood beside the king. Yet Catherine now controlled a collection tied directly to sovereign history, and the symbolism was impossible to hide. Catherine carried a different fear back from Windsor. She spoke privately with William and admitted that Charles might be turning her into the instrument through which he punished his wife. The Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the woman married to the heir, understood that historic jewels connected her to the monarchy's next chapter. She also understood that every future appearance could now be presented as proof that she had replaced Camilla before the current reign had even ended. William listened carefully before warning her that refusing the responsibility could humiliate his father and weaken the authority of the order. The prince had not requested the transfer. Her staff had not proposed it. Charles had designed the entire plan alone and concealed it until every page was ready for his signature. That secrecy disturbed them both. Charles, meanwhile, studied an old photograph of Queen Victoria wearing one of the collection's most important brooches. He told a senior courtier in a documented private account that royal jewelry must serve the crown's future, not anyone's need for personal reassurance. His words made clear that the decision had been deliberate. Camilla began to fear that someone inside her household had supplied the king with information about how the brooches had recently been used. Catherine then remembered the reference inside the file and realized she had been present at the ceremony that changed everything. The transfer may have been signed in silence, but its true beginning lay weeks earlier, during one ceremony, one missing authorization, and one moment Charles could neither forgive nor forget. The point of no return came during a ceremony intended to honor Queen Victoria's legacy. Camilla entered wearing the Empress brooch, one of the collection's most restricted pieces, while Catherine watched from only a few feet away. The jewel glittered beneath the chandeliers, but Charles was not admiring it. He was staring at the fastening, the altered setting, and the unmistakable proof that someone had ignored his direct instruction. Charles kept his expression controlled as the Queen Victoria Memorial Reception continued around him. The event had been created to mark a major anniversary connected to the Victorian era, bringing historians, diplomats, and senior royal household members to Windsor Castle. The royal household, the network of officials and staff who organized the sovereign's duties, had prepared every detail carefully because the evening was meant to show that the monarchy protected its history. Yet one forbidden jewel had already turned that message into a private crisis. The king knew the Empress brooch had been classified as too fragile to wear. A conservation note, meaning a formal assessment explaining how a historic object must be protected, required the piece to remain inside the secure vault until restoration was complete. He had personally approved that restriction. Now the historic clasp had been replaced with a temporary fastening so the brooch could be attached to Camilla's gown. Someone had not simply removed it, someone had altered it. Camilla met Charles during a private pause between engagements, and he asked one direct question: who had approved the jewel? She did not apologize. The Queen replied that her position should not require her to seek permission every time she selected a historic piece for an official occasion. He answered that the restriction had never been about rank, it had been about damage. Catherine entered before either of them could step away. She heard the final words, stopped, and immediately sensed the anger between them. Camilla turned toward the Princess of Wales and said that future queens should understand the difference between inheritance and impatience. The remark struck with precision. Catherine said nothing, but the humiliation stayed with her long after she left the room. Charles received the worst confirmation later that night. A royal conservator showed him a tiny fracture near the brooch's mounting during a documented inspection. The damage could be repaired, yet it proved the warning had been justified. The king then learned through a recorded staff account that Camilla's private secretary had pressured a junior curator to release the piece, describing her request as equal to sovereign approval. Charles did not confront his wife again that evening. Instead, he ordered a complete audit of every Victorian jewel placed under her access, and what that examination uncovered went far beyond one damaged brooch. What began with one unauthorized brooch was about to become a direct confrontation over whether Camilla's crown gave her authority or merely the appearance of it. There were no advisors in the room when Charles finally confronted Camilla. No private secretaries, no courtiers, and no carefully drafted phrases to soften the damage. The king placed the transfer order between them and told his wife that the collection would pass to Catherine immediately. Camilla did not reach for the document. She pushed her chair back, looked directly at him, and demanded to know whether he was protecting the crown or replacing her. Charles had chosen his private library at Windsor for a reason. He had dismissed every aide before she entered, ensuring that neither officials nor committees could be blamed for what followed. The transfer order, the formal command changing who controlled the collection, carried his decision alone. He told the Queen that the Victorian brooches belonged to the sovereign institution, meaning the enduring crown, rather than any individual royal. Access depended on stewardship, careful conservation, and obedience to restrictions designed to protect objects that could never be replaced. Camilla heard something colder. She accused him of using Catherine's popularity to erase everything she had endured to stand beside him. The years of rejection, public anger, and whispered judgment had not disappeared when she was crowned. Historic jewelry had become proof that she was no longer treated as temporary. Her voice faltered when she asked whether he still saw her as a woman who had to prove, every day, that she belonged. Charles refused to retreat. He pointed toward the conservation report beside the damaged Empress brooch and said the decision was not about their marriage. It was about trust. The king told her that she had turned a protected royal object into a test of personal status, risking history simply to demonstrate that no one could deny her request. Camilla finally lifted the order. She read Catherine's name, placed the document back on the desk with deliberate care, then removed another Victorian brooch from her jacket. Without breaking eye contact, the Queen set it beside the file. The gesture carried no apology. It felt like surrender sharpened into defiance. Charles then revealed what the audit had uncovered. On 3 earlier occasions, Victorian pieces had been moved from secure storage or prepared for use before conservation approval was complete. A conservation approval is the specialist clearance confirming that a historic object can be handled safely. Each breach had been explained away. Together, they formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. Camilla insisted that previous queens had selected historic jewelry through long-established custom. He answered that no previous queen had treated restricted pieces as personal property. The words struck harder than accusation because they questioned not her title, but her judgment. Camilla rose and warned him that the transfer would not remain private. The public would see Catherine's elevation as the deliberate humiliation of the reigning queen, whatever explanation he offered. Camilla walked out believing Charles had chosen Catherine over her. But the authority behind his decision reached far beyond marital anger, and its full force was only beginning to emerge. Charles had not acted impulsively. While Camilla believed the order had been born from one bitter argument, the king had spent days building a structure she could not overturn. Legal advisors reviewed the collection's status. Conservators recorded every vulnerable setting. The royal collection's custodians prepared a new chain of authority. Yet the decisive conversation was not with a lawyer. It was with William, who understood that Catherine's elevation could divide the family overnight. Charles summoned his son to a private room at Windsor and placed the completed papers before him. The royal collection, the body responsible for protecting historic objects held for the monarchy, had confirmed that the Victorian brooches were not Camilla's personal possessions. They belonged to the crown as an enduring institution. That distinction gave the sovereign authority to reassign custody, ceremonial use, and responsibility without seeking permission from the Queen or her household. William studied the pages before answering. Revised access lists would remove Camilla's staff from direct control. New vault permissions would identify who could enter secure storage. Conservation signatures would be required before any brooch could be moved, while loan approvals would pass through a direct reporting line to Catherine's household. The system had been built so carefully that emotion could no longer change it. The king then asked whether Catherine would accept the responsibility. William chose every word with care. He said his wife would serve the crown, but she would not take part in humiliating Camilla. The prince understood why the collection required protection, yet he also knew the public would not see paperwork or damaged settings. They would see one woman losing power and another gaining it. Charles did not deny that risk. He replied that refusing the transfer could create a worse message, suggesting Catherine lacked readiness for the role awaiting her. William felt the trap close around them. Loyalty to his father demanded acceptance. Protection of his wife demanded distance. Either choice could be used against the future queen. Then Charles disclosed the clause he had kept until last. The succession provision, a legal instruction designed to remain active when the throne passes to the next monarch, meant Catherine's authority would continue when William became king. No fresh order would be required. The collection had not merely been moved for the present reign. Its future had already been decided. William left the meeting but remained beside the closed library door, rubbing his wedding ring before calling Catherine. He hesitated because the decision had entered their marriage without either of them inviting it. A senior custodian later confirmed in a documented briefing that Camilla could not reverse the arrangement through her staff. Only Charles, or eventually William as sovereign, could change it. The first transfer was scheduled for the following morning. Camilla would have to watch the cases leave her secure rooms, while Catherine prepared to receive them. The documents had established who held the power. Now the opening of the vault would reveal who was prepared to endure its emotional cost. The following morning, the change became physical. 2 custodians entered Camilla's secure jewelry room, carrying sealed transfer cases and an inventory bearing Catherine's name. No argument could stop them. No private appeal could delay them. Camilla stood beside the long cabinet as each Victorian brooch was lifted from its velvet position, inspected beneath a lamp, and placed into a new case. For the first time, she understood what final truly meant. Camilla watched the formal process unfold without interruption. Each brooch was photographed, checked against the conservation ledger, placed inside protective housing, sealed, and signed over to Catherine's designated custodian. The conservation ledger, a detailed official record of an object's condition, movement, and approved handling, ensured that no jewel could disappear behind private influence again. Every signature made the separation more real. Every closed case removed another piece of authority from the Queen's hands. The loss was painfully specific. Camilla still retained access to other royal jewels, yet Queen Victoria's collection carried a different weight. Those brooches were connected to sovereignty, endurance, widowhood, and the survival of a dynasty through grief. Holding them had made her feel linked to the women who had protected the monarchy before her. Losing them suggested that Charles no longer trusted her to carry that memory forward. Camilla finally asked the chief custodian to leave one sentimental brooch behind for an upcoming engagement. She had worn it before, and believed its return could be delayed by a few days. He lowered his eyes, then explained that even temporary use now required Catherine's written approval. The Queen said nothing. She simply stepped aside as the piece disappeared into its case. Silence followed the officials out. Camilla dismissed her remaining staff, closed the door, and sat alone before the empty cabinet. She removed her glasses and pressed her fingers against her forehead. The controlled public mask finally slipped. Her title remained untouched, but the bare velvet spaces told a harsher story. The king had taken trust away without removing a single word from her name. Camilla reached for her phone and called Charles. She ended the call before it connected. Instead, she wrote a brief note. "I understand the order." Her hand paused, but no personal sentence followed. Catherine received the collection at Kensington Palace and immediately refused to place it inside her dressing room. She ordered every case moved into a conservation suite, a secure working area where historic objects are examined and protected, signaling that she would treat the jewels as a duty rather than a victory. Then the princess discovered the Empress brooch sealed separately beside a handwritten instruction from Charles. It must remain unworn until she personally approved its restoration. Catherine did not authorize it for herself. She requested a private meeting with Camilla, without Charles, William, or a single aide present. The transfer had separated the two women through authority, but Catherine's unexpected invitation would force them to face each other without titles, courtiers, or anyone else to absorb the pain. Catherine did not summon Camilla to a palace office or seat herself behind a desk. She chose a small private sitting room and asked that no aides remain outside the door. When Camilla entered, the Empress brooch rested inside a closed case between two chairs. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The collection had made them symbols in someone else's decision. Now they had to decide whether they would also become enemies. Catherine spoke first. She explained that accepting the collection without meeting Camilla would make the transfer look triumphant and personal, neither of which reflected what she wanted. The Empress brooch, the fragile Victorian jewel whose unauthorized use triggered the crisis, had become more than an object. It now carried the weight of Charles's anger, the Queen's fear, and the future monarch's judgment. Camilla admitted that she had initially believed Catherine encouraged the king to act. The order granted the princess permanent authority, even after William eventually inherited the throne. That made the transfer feel less like temporary discipline and more like a declaration that one woman's royal future had already overtaken another woman's present. Catherine did not avoid the deeper wound. She said the remark at the Victorian reception had humiliated her. For years, she had been compared with women who came before her, praised as a future queen one moment, and treated as a carefully placed symbol the next. She told Camilla that she never knew when admiration was sincere, or when it was being used to make someone else feel smaller. Camilla's resistance finally weakened. She confessed in their private conversation that wearing the restricted brooch had been partly an act of defiance. Attention was moving toward William and Catherine, and she feared becoming irrelevant while still standing beside the sovereign. The Queen wanted that room to recognize that she still held authority. Instead, the gesture exposed how desperately she feared losing it. Catherine opened the case but did not touch the jewel. She slid it toward Camilla and said the brooch would be restored, yet neither of them should wear it until they could do so without turning it into a weapon. The princess then placed the conservator's photograph beside the case. Camilla stared at the tiny fracture near the altered clasp. She revealed that she had never been told the temporary fastening had caused damage. Her anger gave way to remorse, and for the first time, she accepted that Charles's restriction had protected something larger than her status. Camilla agreed to surrender every remaining informal claim to the collection. She asked Catherine to preserve its history rather than use it to prove succession. The future queen promised that each piece would remain part of the crown, never a trophy of personal victory. Their understanding came too late to contain the story. Within hours, a photograph of the sealed cases leaving Camilla's rooms reached the public. Inside that room, the rivalry had begun to soften. But beyond the palace gates, the world was about to turn the transfer into a judgment on both women. The story exploded through a single photograph. Two dark conservation cases being carried from Camilla's Windsor rooms beneath the supervision of royal custodians. By midday, the image had crossed every major broadcast. By evening, it had become a national symbol. Some saw Catherine's rise. Others saw Camilla's humiliation. Almost no one knew that the two women had already met privately, or that the most important brooch remained sealed and unworn. The palace responded with a carefully controlled statement, confirming Catherine's appointment under a long-term custodial arrangement. That arrangement, a formal system giving one royal responsibility for protecting, approving, and managing historic objects, was described as necessary to preserve Queen Victoria's collection for future generations. The words sounded calm. The silence around them did not. Nothing mentioned the damaged Empress brooch, Camilla's unauthorized use, or the confrontation that had ended with Charles transferring control. Speculation filled every missing detail. One fictional national newspaper placed the photograph across its front page, beneath the headline, "Victoria's Jewels Pass to Catherine. King Ends Camilla's Control." Commentators described the order as a sign that the monarchy had already begun turning toward its next chapter. Others called it the clearest public reduction of the Queen's influence since the reign began. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. One woman held an old portrait of Queen Victoria beside a photograph of Catherine, while broadcasters framed the transfer as proof that the future queen had become the guardian of royal history. The comparison carried enormous weight. Victoria represented endurance and sovereign authority, while the princess now appeared to represent continuity. Camilla, though still crowned, was being pushed into the story as the woman left behind. Camilla watched the evening coverage alone. She flinched when one commentator described the decision as a royal rejection. and claimed Charles had chosen his daughter-in-law over his wife. The Queen turned off the television before the segment ended. Her private understanding with Catherine offered no protection against a public narrative built around defeat. Catherine felt no triumph. She instructed her office not to release celebratory photographs and refused a proposal to wear one of the Victorian brooches at her next engagement. The future queen knew that displaying a piece immediately would turn responsibility into conquest and reopen the wound she had tried to close. Charles finally broke the palace's silence through a second written statement. The king declared that the transfer had been his decision alone, removing public blame from Catherine and accepting responsibility for the consequences. Yet even that intervention intensified anticipation. The nation now waited to see which woman would next appear wearing Victoria's legacy. Catherine prepared a different answer. The public expected Catherine to display her victory, but the choice she made at the next royal gathering would transform the collection from a symbol of division into the final verdict on Charles's decision. At the first state reception after the transfer, every camera waited for Catherine to appear, wearing Queen Victoria's most recognizable brooch. She did not. Catherine entered with a simple modern piece, while Camilla wore no historic brooch at all. Then Charles revealed the restored Empress brooch inside a protected exhibition case dedicated to Queen Victoria's legacy. In that moment, the jewel ceased to belong to either woman and returned symbolically to the crown. Charles knew the reception carried more weight than any ordinary royal gathering. It was the first public event attended by the king, Camilla, William, and Catherine since the transfer became known, which meant every expression and gesture would be treated as a statement. The royal collection, the historic objects held and protected for the monarchy rather than owned for private use, had accepted Catherine's final decision. The restored brooch would be displayed periodically and worn only during occasions directly connected to Queen Victoria's legacy. Catherine found Camilla in a quiet corridor before they entered. She asked whether the exhibition plan caused her any further pain. The Queen did not pretend the past days had been easy, but she replied that protecting the brooch mattered more than proving who had the right to wear it. The future Queen thanked her, and for once, neither woman needed to defend her place. Charles then approached his wife privately. He acknowledged that the manner of the transfer had wounded her and that his silence had made the decision feel colder than it needed to be. Camilla admitted the hurt remained, yet she told the monarch that she finally understood why he could not ignore the breach of trust. Forgiveness had not erased the damage. Accountability had simply made healing possible. The moment of truth arrived when the exhibition case was unveiled. Camilla and Catherine stood on opposite sides of Charles. The princess did not step forward to claim the brooch, and the Queen did not turn away from it. William watched their restraint and recognized what his father's order had truly meant. The decision had never been only about elevating his wife. It declared that royal history could not be used to soothe insecurity, reward popularity, or settle personal status. Catherine remained the permanent custodian of Queen Victoria's brooch collection. Camilla accepted the new boundary. Charles retained the authority of his order, while the trust damaged inside his marriage began to recover through honesty rather than denial. One woman had lost control but regained dignity by accepting responsibility. Another had gained power but refused to turn it into conquest. The king had protected the crown, though the choice had cost him peace before it restored balance. And as Queen Victoria's brooch rested safely behind glass, the monarchy delivered its final answer. Royal legacy belongs neither to the woman wearing the crown today, nor to the woman destined to wear it tomorrow. It belongs to the institution they are both required to serve. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.